Yeah, it's been a weird one for Norwich.
Would you have Sargent at Leeds, Connor?
No, I'd be looking at someone with the greatest of respect with a bit of a higher quality than Josh Sargent if Leeds are to stay in the Premier League if we are to get promoted.
I think he's slightly bitter.
Is he good enough for Leeds? Is he good enough for a bottom-end relegation battle in the Premier League?
Well, I'm glad you got that little dig in, because that's exactly where they're going to be in the Premier League next season. Josh Sargent will win USA the World Cup.
Hello guys, welcome to the Sportsman Untitled. Bit of an international break special for you today. As you can see, I'm delighted to be joined by Gab Sutton as always and Talk Norwich City expert Jack Reeve. We'll come on to a deep dive on Norwich City later on in the show. We're also going to have a little bit of chat about the international break as well. I think it's a good place to start actually, isn't it, the international break, given it's a bit of a weird time. We don't have any fixtures until next weekend. So Gab, which championship teams do you think for you have benefited from this break and which will have wanted to keep playing the games?
I think Sheffield United are going to be the teams that will look at it and think they're a little bit glad that they've got a breather, because they kept finding themselves on the right side of these tight games, and it feels like every game's a real slog for them, and they seem to be able to keep grinding out results, sometimes with limited availability. So I think the international break would probably be a good window for them to get a few players back and maybe just recharge a little bit. Whereas I think somebody like Derby County at the bottom of the table, who are on this wonderful winning run, would probably have wanted maybe one or two more games.
How about you, Jack? Because it's kind of trying to balance that momentum versus form versus time to recover and injuries. What are you making of this international break and who's benefiting from it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always an interesting one. And I think wherever you are, whether you're on a losing run or a winning run, you try and turn a narrative in a sense that it's either going to, it's good for you or it's bad for you. I'm actually dubious as to whether it makes too much of a difference at all, really. I look at Leeds United and I look at their manager in Daniel Farke, and I'm, first of all, very fond of him, and second of all, very aware of his work. I think this will come at a really good time for Leeds. He is a man that is always on the training pitch with his players. He likes to carry out drills himself, and I think he'll really cherish just some extra time to regroup. They're still, in my eyes, very much in the driving seat in this kind of title-winning chase. I think this comes at a good time. They've had some interesting results recently, slightly out of line of what I'd expect from Leeds United. So I think in terms of managers being able to get on the training ground with their players, setting out the stalls again, setting out the targets again, and just going from square one and just trying to find a way through. I think Farke will have really, really enjoyed this time with his players.
I think you're bang on there in terms of fans, especially fans of championship clubs. You can twist the narrative however you want to. I'm thinking of Sunderland fans who were probably really disappointed to be going into this international break after a 3-0 defeat. But then you look at their manager and he probably does want a bit of time on the training ground and a couple of weeks to kind of reset. So Gab would kind of agree with that. Teams can picture it however they want to.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually quite curious to get Jack's thoughts on Daniel Farke in terms of the longer term picture for Leeds United, because there is obviously this feeling for Leeds fans at the back of their mind whereby even if he does get them over the line this season, his record in the Premier League with Norwich City isn't great. So from what you know of Daniel Farke, Jack, do you have a confidence that he's going to have learnt some lessons from those two seasons where Norwich finished rock bottom?
Well, he'll have to have learned lessons. I mean, you summed it up very well. Incredibly wise and disciplined in terms of getting teams out of the Championship. That job's not done yet with Leeds United, and slightly scared for them over recent weeks. But I think he will get the job done. Look, he's had time to learn lessons. What I would say is the Premier League now, even compared to, 3-4 years ago when Norwich City were last in the Premier League under Daniel Farke, it's got even harder. It's got even tougher. I mean, I remember sitting on this very podcast last year going, Leicester and Southampton and Ipswich, what brilliant championship teams. They should be fine. And, we're all sat here now looking at that bottom three, wondering what's happened. It's an incredibly, incredibly difficult feat to try and remain in the Premier League now. I think it's more than just spending a load of cash. It takes a huge effort from all departments. I think what Farke has been able to do is he's become slightly more nuanced with his with his kind of in-game approach. I think I've seen a maturity about him there. It was always quite very one-dimensional with Norwich City, and that's fine when you've got a Buendia and a Pukki in the Championship, and you can kind of just blow teams away. But when you're up against Premier League outfits, that's not quite as easy. So, yeah, there's still very much a box that needs to be ticked for Daniel Farke, and that is Premier League survival. It's going to be mightily tough, whether that's with Leeds or someone else in the future. So yeah, interested to see. I think he has matured, but there are still question marks for me over his ability in the top flight.
I think with Farke, I think I'm a bigger fan. I mean, I'm sure you are as well, Jack, but most Leeds fans, I think I'm a bigger fan of Daniel Farke and the work he's done than most Leeds fans. Gab, where do you sit on it in terms of can he be a successful Premier League manager? That's a big sigh. That is a big sigh, isn't
it?
To start off with.
I've been really impressed by some of the improvements that he's made to Leeds United this season, and some of the areas that they've improved. I do wonder a little bit from a point of view of ruthlessness in terms of making decisions that you've got to make to make that next step, for instance. So I would say the situation with Ilian Meslier, where just why aren't you signing another goalkeeper? It would have almost been kinder to Meslier when he's made so many high-profile errors to actually take him out of the limelight, and either sign a new goalkeeper in January or bring Carl Darlow into the 11, and he's done neither. And so little things like that make you think: does he have that ruthless streak required for the Premier League? Is he more focused on nurturing players and developing players, which can work at a certain level, but then once you get into the cutthroat nature of the Premier League, you've got to be a bit more ruthless. I'm not sure whether he's going to find what's required there.
Yeah, I also think he may not be given as much time as other managers based on that past record in the Premier League with Norwich. Let's throw it forward anyway, because Championship football is back this weekend, and we've got some cracking games to look forward to. Starting on Friday night with a big game as Sheffield United host Coventry at Bramall Lane. Gab, Sheffield United 7 wins out of 9, Coventry 10 wins out of 12. Blades level on points with the Leeds at the top of the table. This feels massive, doesn't it, for Sheffield United season?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really intriguing game where you've got Sheffield United, who come off the back of that victory at Hillsborough, of course, and a great day for everyone associated with them. But then Coventry, of course, coming off the back of a big 3-0 victory themselves with a Hadji Wright hat-trick, and they're possibly another team that wouldn't have minded the games to sort of roll on a little bit longer in terms of the international weekend. So. But then, I mean, I've gone into games doubting Sheffield United a lot before, and they seem to be able to find the solution. So I'm thinking it might be a draw at Bramall Lane on Friday night. I don't know what you think, Simon, from a Sky Blue Army perspective.
It's the toughest game we've got left. I can't help but think we'll probably lose narrowly, as everyone seems to do against Sheffield United this season, by 1 goal. And then there's the whole narrative of Callum O'Hare and Gustavo Hamer as well, which I don't like thinking about. But
it's like seeing your ex, isn't it?
I know, but you can't. I mean, the shirt behind me says it all, doesn't it? You kind of have to take that down on Friday night. But, yeah, I can't help but feel Wilder always gets the job done, and I think they might just have a little bit too much quality for us. Jack, what have you made of Sheffield United in particular this season? And we've talked a lot about them edging these types of games, but can they edge their way to the Premier League?
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that ability to just win by narrow margins. I've watched Sheffield United a lot this season, and look, Norwich lost away from home. We drew to them at Carrow Road, and I walked away from the away fixture. I think it was 2-0, and I just looked at what I'd kind of witnessed in front of me, and I was like, how did we lose that? Like, how does Sheffield United keep having the ability to do that? But you look at all of the great Championship sides over the past decade, 15 years, and it's that ability to just grind results out on a consistent basis, lots of clean sheets, finding an important goal. And I think when you're probably a side going to Bramall Lane and you're defending for large parts of it, it's just that mental fatigue that brings along, and it's that ability to grind teams down, not only physically but mentally as well. I've been impressed by them. I think the real thing I noticed when Norwich have played them both times this season is their impact off the bench. You know, you look at the respective benches from Norwich compared to Sheffield United on both occasions, and it was worlds apart. And I think ultimately that's the difference. And maybe that's the ability to be able to edge games by narrow margins. It's actually the starting 11s aren't a whole lot different between a mid-table side and a side fighting for the kind of automatic slots, but it's that ability to bring a bit of quality off the bench that only the top sides have. So, yeah, I've been impressed by them. I think, they've been here before. They know what to do. I don't know if you guys have a similar feeling. I've just got this slightly sort of impending sense of doom that we're just going to be in a similar situation at this point next season where the three sides that go up are coming straight back down. And that's a really kind of nagging feeling in my mind. I get this sense of like, what's the point? I don't want to bring the vibe down here, but I'm looking at Sheffield United. I'm going, we've got no chance next season. No chance.
Jack, we can talk about the Championship playoff scramble or the futility of existence. Either's great.
Sorry, I'm nursing man flu, and I see a Norwich City section later on in the running order, and I'm just fearing the worst here.
Let's maybe not look at the bigger picture and misery in the Premier League for Sheffield United then quite yet. I'll push you both for a score prediction for this one on Friday night. Gab?
1-1 for me.
1-1. I'll go 1-0 Sheffield United. What about you, Jack?
I'll go 1-1 as well. Yeah, I mean, the turnaround at Coventry has been remarkable since Mr. Lampard has come in. And yeah, I think Sheffield United will be in a stage now where they just don't want to lose games. They want to continue momentum, and this will be regarded for them as one of the tougher fixtures. So get through damage free and try and move on.
Absolutely, a massive fixture as well. Saturday at lunchtime. Let's look ahead to that one because it's Hull versus Luton, which has massive consequences at the bottom of the table. Obviously, we're running out of games for those teams in the bottom three, Luton being one of them. Live on Sky Sports, 12:30 Saturday. Relegation 6-pointer, isn't it, Jack? I mean, Hull are on 41 points at the moment, Luton on 35. It feels like if Hull and Ruben Sellers can get a win here, they might have just about done enough and put enough distance in between them and the relegation zone.
Oh, it's remarkable we're at this point in the season, and maybe it was just slight naivety, but with Luton I was just like, oh, it'll come good at some point. It will come good, they'll pull clear, and now we're in, at the end of March, and they're in real trouble. I can't believe the way in which it's turned. The bulk of, or a lot of the players are still the same that they got promoted with out of the Championship that came down in the Premier League. I've seen it before with other teams where when you go through a promotion and then a relegation, it takes so much effort to get up in the first place. Then you've got the mental turmoil of what the Premier League brings and relegation and all of the implications of that. The ability to get up and go again is incredibly tough. I don't think that can be underestimated.
Jack, can I just pick up on that point? Because for me, if I look at your club historically, whenever you've come down in the first season after a promotion, there's been one time where you rejuvenated the squad with a lot of young, fresh faces, and it reinvigorated things. I think that might have been in 2020. But then there's been other seasons where you've not been able to rejuvenate the squad, 2016 and 2022, I think, where the squad just basically stagnated. And I suppose it's that stagnation that sort of Luton are really suffering from because they trusted the same players that got them up, and it's kind of backfired.
I love chatting with Gab because his ability to pick dates is far better than my ability. I think it's spot on. I think it's really tough. I think you have to, move things around and shake it up. You've either got this issue where, I don't know, maybe a Carlton Morris at Luton where he's been through that process. It hasn't quite worked out. He's back to square one. That ability to just go again is tough. Or you've got players that you've brought in who were expecting to, have a future in the Premier League, and now they're, scrapping against Hull at the bottom of the Championship. Like, that's not where they will want to be. So you're going to have strange squad dynamics in there. I just think from a morale and a kind of, pick yourself up and go again. I think that's overlooked sometimes. And the difference in quality between the top and the bottom of the Championship, I don't actually think there's a whole lot of difference, like over the course of the season. Yes, you'll sometimes get the occasional outlier, but there's so much of actually off the pitch that I don't think we look enough into. And Luton, look, they overachieved to get into the Premier League. I think they overachieved in the Premier League despite coming down. And, you know, unfortunately, I think they're below where they expect to be, but you know, that they're at a point now where they've really got to dig deep, and this is a really, really tough fixture this weekend. I'm fearing the worst for Luton. I was just kind of blindsiding it and just expecting things to come good at Luton, and I don't see that happening now. They're defensively, they're all over the place. They don't score enough goals. All the classic symptoms. It's tough place for them to be at the moment.
Yeah, this kind of squad not changing was a reason that I had them pretty solid as playoff contenders or top 2 contenders at the start of the season. And look how that's turned out. Gab, a few words on Hull, please, because their away form's sensational, but they've still got the worst home form in the Championship. 4 wins all season at the Cake-On.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting for Hull City is they brought in, first of all, they sacked Liam Rosenior, which, again, I think we can always come back to that. That was a mistake. They appointed a manager in Tim Volter, who's extreme possession heavy and basically playing through the defence in terms of early build-up. And that requires a certain style of player. Type of player, and then it didn't work out with Tim Volter, partly because of this massive turnover of players. And then they appoint Ruben Sellers, who is a coach that I rate very highly. However, his principles, he was schooled at Southampton, very much a high pressing 4-3-3 type of coach, does his best work with young, energetic players. Maybe not exactly the same sort of profile of players that they'd sort of recruited for. So it's a bit of a mismatch of a squad, and I think that's reflected in where they are in the table. But I'm looking forward to seeing what Ruben Sellers can do maybe next season when he has a little bit more leeway to shape the squad in his image, if he keeps them up this year.
Are you confident that he's keeping them up?
I wouldn't say confident, but I think they might just have enough.
Okay, I'll get a score prediction from you both for Hull Luton as well. Gab, you start.
I'll go for 2-1 to Hull.
Okay, Jack?
I'm going to be really boring and say another draw. I'm just looking at the table now. Yeah, I think Luton are in real danger. I think I'm going to go 2-2. 2-2 draw this weekend.
I'll go 1-1. I think a draw won't particularly help Luton, but I'll sit on the fence as well. And the last game, quickly, we'll have a look forward to this weekend is Burnley Bristol City, because I mean, if we talk about teams kind of grinding it out, Jack, Burnley, ridiculous defensive record. Is it going to be enough, and can they win this weekend as well?
Well, I mean, obviously it's obvious to say I've been mightily impressed with Burnley from a defensive standpoint this season. I'm not overly sure how enthused I'd be to be a season ticket holder there, but at the end of the day, I'd rather be in the position that they are than Norwich City are at the moment. I just think James Trafford is remarkable. And I know that lots of clean sheets. Yeah, obvious thing to say, but he's going to the very top. Really, really impressive, and a great story from the EFL. Also, really impressed with Bristol City. Just absolutely ruthless in front of goal. Seemingly, they've done a job on us both times this season, just through pure ruthlessness. Didn't have much of the ball. Didn't actually have too many chances, but quality in front of goal, effective. Kind of tactical ability to just completely nullify the opposition. So I think this is going to be a good game. I don't think there's going to be too many goals, but I think Bristol City have a better ability than most in the Championship to get something out of this Burnley side. I've been really impressed with Bristol City. I like the look of them.
Gab, how about Bristol City then? Because they're the team that could push Coventry and West Brom, it seems, most likely out of those playoff positions. They've been very, very good, haven't they?
Yes, I really like that box midfield of the former Derby contingent of Max Bird and Jason Knight, and plus Scott Twine and Anis Mehmeti, who's playing for Albania, of course. So I think that box midfield is very strong. However, I would still say that in terms of if we're holding them to sort of top 6 standards, I'd maybe have reservations about how strong their wing backs are in terms of Sykes and Roberts. I'm not quite sure that they really move the needle as wing backs at this level in the system that Liam Manning has. So for me, I think Bristol City might just miss out. I think West Brom and Coventry are a little bit of a notch above the rest.
And a score prediction then, Gab, for Burnley Bristol City?
I think it'll be 3-0 to Burnley.
3 goals for Burnley, my word. I'll go 1-0 Burnley. Jack, what about you?
Yeah, after everything I've praised Bristol City about, Gab's point about the wing backs reminded me. I think Norwich City had 20-something shots away from home, which was, I think, the most we've had pretty much all season. Their wing backs played incredibly high. Callum Doyle for us just was swinging crosses into the box for fun. So, yeah, I think Burnley will edge it. I'm not quite sure it'll be convincing, as Gab alludes to. I'll go Burnley 1-0.
Excellent stuff. And I don't know if this is a good thing for you, Jack, at this point, but we are now going to look at Norwich City in focus this season. You got West Brom this weekend, which is quite a good place to start, because I think you're 8 points behind them. They're obviously occupying the final playoff spot. It feels, and I think me and Gab have discussed, that the glimmer of the playoff hopes might have faded slightly. What do you make of that in general? If you beat West Brom, is it back on, or have your hopes gone?
No, I'm afraid, even as one of the most optimistic Norwich City fans, it probably is season over, which is a real shame, because I was looking at this fixture about 6 weeks ago going, oh, this is going to be a cracker. Two teams that are going to be contending for the top 6. We had a run of games. I think it was Oxford and Preston, Derby County, Sheffield Wednesday, all at home, and Norwich won none of them, and they took the lead in 3 of them. We've got a naivety when we take the lead. We take the lead a lot, and then for whatever reason, I think it's Johannes Hoftorp's kind of naivety in the Championship. It's a young squad. The ability to just find ways through games we've not had this season. The quality going forwards is undoubtedly there. You've got the Borja Science, who's the Championship's top goal scorer. You've got Josh Sargent, closely following on his heels, and has missed like a third of the season. So the quality is undoubted, but goalkeeping numbers have been really poor this season. Angus Gunn's form has dropped off a cliff. The number 2 is George Long, whose numbers are the worst in the Championship by a long stretch. So, yeah, we've been close. We've been really close to doing something special this season, but it's really fallen away in the last month. And yeah, I think it's probably season over this time around. It's going to be a massive summer lying ahead. There's going to be a lot of churn in the side, and that's probably a good thing. There are some question marks from certain quarters about Johannes Hoftorp. I'm still a massive believer. I think he's a really shrewd coach. But at the end of the day, Norwich are now closer to the relegation zone than they are the playoffs. So that will raise question marks when the kind of top brass of the club say that top 6 is very much the aim this season. That's not going to happen unless a miracle occurs. And we've been off it for 4 or 5 weeks now, which is a real disappointment.
Yeah, 1 win in 8, and you've not played any of the top 6 during that time either. I think me and Gab have both been left frustrated by Norwich more than anything this season, because you look at someone like Josh Sargent, 12 goals, 5 assists in 24 games, and you look at Borja Science, who's still winning the Golden Boot race, and you think, how isn't this team in the playoff picture? What would have happened if Sargent had been fit all season, say?
Well, I think Sargent's, there's been no flow really in the side this season. Kenny McLean had a long suspension. Borja Science had a long suspension. Josh Sargent was out for ages with injury. The defence has been chopped and changed. The midfield, similar. There has been a unbelievable amount of different starting 11s this season. It's been a mix of our own individual errors that have led to injuries and suspensions, and partly out of our control. I think you mix that with a head coach managing his first season in the Championship. I think he's probably learned lessons around the intensity and the load that the kind of Championship fixture calendar brings. It has been hugely frustrating when you look at a front 3 that, some weeks is, Matej Urasec, Josh Sargent and Borja Science, and you're going, oh my goodness, this is a mid-table side. It leaves you asking questions, but it's it does feel. I think frustrating's the word. Frustrating's the word, because there have been games this season, and I think I've been on this podcast talking about them, when we've blown sides away, good sides as well, and then you struggle to muster a shot at home against Oxford, and it's like that I think our high is incredibly high, and our low is so much lower than a West Brom or a Coventry or a Bristol City. That's been the difference. Our higher is higher. Our lower is, my goodness, it's so much lower than the teams we were ultimately trying to fight for 5th and 6th against.
Well, I think results have dropped off since I got you and Chris wearing those sailor hats. Maybe I've cursed you. I wanted to ask you about Kellen Fisher and Lucien Mahovo, because I think when you're a Norwich City fullback coming through in this era, there's going to be obvious comparisons to Max Aarons and Jamal Lewis. how do you sort of judge the development of Fisher and Mahovo in terms of their progress coming through the academy?
Kellen Fisher's been excellent. Signed him from Bromley. Has just been he kind of played his youth football as a striker and progressively dropped further in the pitch. And you can tell he's cultured. He's brilliant with the ball at his feet. My concern with him was he's tiny. He's very lightweight. He's small. I thought he would struggle in the Championship. Actually, it's been one of his biggest strengths. He's a real fighter and technically very sound. Lucian Mahavo is an exciting one. I didn't know much about him at the start of this season and was dropped in during one of many injury crises and just looked at home. He's 18 years old, but he looks like a fully grown man. And I think often when you drop a 17, 18-year-old into a first team in the Championship, you can kind of tell that they're young and inexperienced, even if they show flashes. With him, not so. I think he's probably slightly further back in his development. I mean, he's played like 4 or 5 games for Norwich and then typically got injured. But he's certainly one to keep an eye on. I suspect he will probably be the number 1 left back next season. And that's been one of the kind of missions from the board at Norwich to lower the age profile of this side. And I think that is the sustainable way to go in the Championship. So there are definitely positives and there are, exciting things happening. Those 2 players being, part of the reason it has been, for the most part, quite a fun season. But again, can you be relying on an 18-year-old week in, week out to produce consistent performances? Probably not. So that's the risk that comes with it. But yeah, the Johannes has been, very dialed into that philosophy of trying to bed in youth, and that's the way I want to see my football club run, and hopefully that brings success long term.
I have to dob Conor in, our Leeds fan who was on last week, right, Gab, because he said he wouldn't have Josh Sargent at Leeds this summer, even though I think it's a move that's been touted about a bit. Jack, I wanted to get your reaction to that, because are you having it? Is he good enough for Leeds? Is he good enough for a bottom-end relegation battle in the Premier League?
Well, I'm glad you got that little dig in, because that's exactly where they're going to be in the Premier League next season. If they do
You've already said it. You've said there's no hope for any of us earlier in the show. So
I like Conor. I think he's slightly bitter that Sargent just basically punted a penalty straight at Meslier earlier in the season, and Meslier dived out of the way of it. So he's probably got that in the back of his mind. Look, Daniel Farke pushed the Josh Sargent signing through at Norwich City. The board didn't want to go near him. Daniel Farke said, "I want this guy." Granted, we probably signed him a season or two too early, and he wasn't up to Premier League levels at that stage. At the end of the day as well, he was 7-8 million pounds. What do you expect to get in the Premier League at that kind of price point? He has developed so much since that stage. He is the best striker in the Championship, undoubtedly. His injury record is a concern. I think that's maybe a reason why Norwich might keep hold of him in the summer. I'm trying to kind of grab onto things, but that's the only reason why a club might get put off. The only reason I'm fearful he'll go to Leeds is because of Farke. Farke loves him. He's his kind of striker. I think he will be excited at the prospect of a Josh Sargent kind of 4 years down the line from when he first signed in the Premier League. I think he's better than anything Leeds have got in that department. And would look, I'm not saying he'll score 15, 20 goals in the Premier League, but for the price point that you'd probably be able to pick him up for, I don't think you're going to get anyone better. I think he is the real deal. It's an exciting year or so ahead for him, and World Cup coming up. The sky's the limit for Josh if he can remain fit. He really is the real deal. He is an exciting player.
And I wanted to finally finish off this chat by talking about Delia Smith, because I know that she kind of finished up on the board this month. And how does that look for your hopes next season, and what kind of changes? Is it kind of a new feeling around the club? Is there going to be more investment? I think kind of we'd want to know a bit about that.
Yeah, I don't think the vibe has kind of changed around the club. I think there's a kind of not an anxiety, an excitement around what next for Norwich. I think the Atanasio Group, look, they're very shrewd investors. They own some sports clubs out in the US, in the Milwaukee Brewers. They are obsessed with data. They are. They're not the kind of owners that are going to come in and chuck 100 million quid at a project and hope it works. I think this is going to be a slow a slow burn. But we've already seen that, in the summer transfer window, when we didn't have to sell in order to reinvest, we were able to get big money for Jonathan Rowe and Adam Eder and Gabriel Sara. You've got a combined kind of 50 million quid there, but just because we had the power in the negotiations, which is rare to say as a Norwich fan. So that's been good to see. We've been able to spend £8 million on Ante Cianats, £7 million on Mate Jurisic. Big money for the Championship. They will undoubtedly bring more spending power. I think there is a huge patience that they bring as well in terms of the head coach that they had a say in hiring. I like the Atenaisios. Look, Delia Smith and Michael Wynne-Jones, there's not too many owners around like them anymore. And ultimately, it wasn't their fault that we were left behind. It was the incredible shift in the football landscape that we saw over the last 25 years. So incredibly grateful for what they brought to the football club. But unfortunately, we were left in a position where, in order to progress and in order to try and squirm our way back into the Premier League, we were going to need more financial firepower, and they couldn't bring it. So we were kind of not forced into it, but we needed to make that move. They spent many years finding the right suitor, and the Atenaisios were that in the end. I like their talk. I like their early actions. I think good things lie ahead under the Atenaisios. I'm excited to see what the landscape looks like in 3-4 years' time.
So does your gut tell you Norwich will be back amongst the playoff contenders next season then?
It's a huge summer. All of my reasons why I've praised Johannes and Ben Napper, our sporting director, is ultimately I think the recruitment's been okay so far. I think we're below where we probably should be this season, but it's a huge summer ahead. They do need to get it right at some point. Will they keep hold of a Sargent and a Science? I don't know. I think either way, they're either going to be left with really quality players or a decent kitty to go and spend. But you only get so many chances at making £6-7 million signings, and most of them have to click to buy some time. So I think we'll be in and amongst it next season. I think we'll be a more developed side. There's certainly no guarantees it could go wrong, but yeah, it's a big summer ahead for Norwich. And look, I think we've got the right people in place to implement a plan. But the Championship is ruthless, and there's nothing saying that if we make a slow start to next season that there could be change ahead. So we shall see. But I'm still upbeat. I'm still optimistic despite a really turgid kind of past month. And I'm confident that we've got good people around the place.
Brilliant stuff. Gab, let's move on quickly to your Championship treble this weekend, please, mate.
Yes, I think Portsmouth are going to beat Blackburn just because of their exceptional home form and the atmosphere that they created at Fratton Park. I think Leeds are going to beat Swansea. Pretty self-explanatory, that one. I think Leeds are the best team in the league, and they're outstanding at Elland Road. And I also think Burnley, given they found a more clinical edge to their game in recent weeks, I think they're going to add goals to their clean sheets at the weekend and beat Bristol City 3-0.
Excellent stuff. I quite like the sound of that treble as well, which will be priced up on Betfred as usual. And I've got a fun question for both of you to finish with, given it's the international break. World Cup 2026, we've already mentioned it, next year. Do any current Championship players stand a chance of making a big impression next summer? Obviously in Canada, America, Mexico. Jack, do I already know who you're going to say?
Well, who you expect me to say? Sargent?
Maybe. I don't know.
if he I really hope he makes a big impression. It all it stands to whether he can stay fit. I was a name popped into my head with my England hat on that we mentioned earlier, and I'm watching England and I'm going, I'm not sure that we're particularly. There's not really a standout goalkeeper at the moment. I would say James Trafford. Why not? Why not? I don't know if that's an obvious answer or not, but I'd have him, in there straight away. I think I like the look of him. He, a couple more years down the line, I can see him maybe not having a big impact, but an impact for this England side for sure.
That's a massive shout. I hadn't even thought of that one. Gab, how about you?
I'm really excited about Chris Rigg, but I think that the World Cup in 2026 is probably a little bit too soon. So maybe we'll give Chris Rigg 2030 World Cup, and we'll say for 2026 it's going to be James Trafford's year.
Amazing stuff. I was looking at the Americans, as you kind of say, kind of World Cup on home soil. I'm looking at Josh Sargent. I have to say Hadji Wright as well. Maybe Brendan Aronson, I think, is the one I'll actually pick out as someone who I'm not in love with as a player, but I feel that he could have a big impact on a home tournament, a World Cup, and actually get some goals and assists and cause a few problems, be a bit of a breakout star.
I'm looking forward to seeing Sargent in the Pochettino side. High pressing team with his energy and hold up play. I think that could be fun to watch.
Well, Pochettino did say they could win the World Cup last week, didn't he? So we'll have to.
There you go.
It would take one hell of a tournament.
Josh Sargent will win USA the World Cup. Done.
There you go. What a perfect way to finish. Josh Sargent's going to win the USA the World Cup. Thanks both Gab and Jack for joining me as always. Make sure you like and subscribe. Get any comments down below if we've missed any players you think could star at next year's World Cup. But that's all for this week's edition of the Sportsman Untitled, and we'll see you next Monday.